Welcome to We Are So Data Driven. My name is Wolfgang Gumpelmaier-Mach from the creative region Linz and Upper Austria. We boost, connect and evolve the creative industries in Linz and Upper Austria and support creative companies and entrepreneurs with connecting and education programs. And today we are here talking about data and music in cooperation with the Stream Festival. It's of course streamed this year, so welcome everyone at home or wherever you are. Today is moderated by Chris Riebenbauer. Welcome, and we're talking with international and national musicians and consultants. And that's it for me. I will co-moderate and co-host this session. Thanks for being here, and I hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Wolfgang, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to this We Are So Data-Driven talk today. I would also like to thank the creative region Linz and Upper Austria for hosting this talk within this year's Stream Festival. And also worth to mention that I'm quite happy to be in person here today in this iconic Ars Electronic Center in beautiful Linz, Austria. Before we'll really get to the core of the talk, let me quickly also introduce my guests. And of course, I would like to start with the first artist in our round. Welcome, SOIA.
Thank you for the invite. Hello.
SOIA, when I was preparing for the introduction for this talk, I, of course, read some articles about you, and some words really stuck with me. Powerful, gentle, demanding, and also melancholic. I think those words describe you and also your music very well. And musically rooted, I would say, between indie soul, R&B, and electronic hip hop. During the last years, you already released your output internationally. You also did showcases internationally, example South by Southwest in Texas, Austin, or also the BBC in London. And also worth to mention that you also played the Stream Festival yesterday. I think it was at 7 p.m., right?
Yes, that explains me being slightly tired today, but I'm super happy. It was really nice to play a concert again.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have you with us today, and so thanks and welcome. The next guest I really like to introduce is Mr. Josh Greenberg. And I know Josh quite some time. And I have to say that I was always really fascinated by Josh's appetite for really work within the culture landscape, for also create culture and then also change culture. And Josh can already look back on an amazing career helping iconic brands grow like Red Bull or Spotify. And now he's based in beautiful Copenhagen in Denmark and is running his own consultancy, Green Mountain Lodge. And Green Mountain Lodge is a creative strategy consultancy in the intersection of culture, music, tech and brand. And as you see, he's a Chelsea fan. I think it's an important day today. And he also recently started to manage an artist and has a creative background. So, Mr. Greenberg, it's an honor to have you on this talk. Welcome.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And next speaker I'd like to introduce is Mr. Craig May. Craig May is originally from Australia, and I would say, is an entertainment industry expert with over 20 years of experience working for iconic companies, music companies like Sony, EMI, Cartel or Red Bull. Now he's based in the UK, and he is running or heading the global marketing service for Fuga. Fuga is a digital distribution company with its headquarters in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And beside music distribution, they are also providing analytics data to their clients and of course also global marketing services. So Greg, I hope everything is awesome in beautiful London, and welcome to the We Are So talk where we talk about artist data today. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Christoph, and hi everyone.
Looking forward to talking through some stuff today and listening to Josh and Sarah also talk about their things as well. So yeah, let's get on with it.
Cool. So last but not least, I quickly would like to introduce myself a bit. My name is Chris Riebenbauer. I come from music. I was a touring and also recording artist for years in my teens and my 20s. Then I made my way quickly into marketing, where I worked many years for Red Bull during the last years. And now I started my own consultancy agency, Brand and Culture Riembauer, where I support brands and organizations to strengthen their identity through authentic and relevant marketing solutions. So let's get to the core of the talk, artist data. When really talking about artist data, we know that there is enormous amount of data out there. And going a bit back to my time when I was a musician, and that's 15 years, 20 years ago, when we toured a lot internationally, doing our headline shows, but then also supporting international artists. At every show, we placed a sheet of paper on the merch table. And we quickly realized that when we, as the musicians, were hanging out at the merch table by ourselves, we A, sold more merch, B, we had great conversations with people who really enjoy our music, and C, we also asked those people to give us their email addresses and names. And some people who bought our merch, they of course wrote down their email addresses by themselves, which means we collected a great list of addresses where we were able to reach out to those people after the tours and said thank you for attending, but also gave them heads up when we were back in town, which means we had a great way to communicating directly to our fans, and we used it. We integrated it into our marketing to market our music. Of course, that was 15, 20 years ago. Now jumping into 2021, digitalization is all over the place. There's enormous resources of data. And if you really want to know where those data come from, we can really divide those things into 3 buckets. The first one is owned data. And that's also the email addresses which I mentioned when I told my story about my band days. Or for example, on your website, you know, when you have your fans subscribing to your mailing list, that's owned data. Or also, if you run an e-commerce store on your website, which I would strongly recommend, that's owned data which you can work with. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is accessible data. So what does accessible data mean? It's data you don't own, but you can access and you can use to contribute to your marketing. For example, Facebook data, YouTube data, Instagram data, all those social media channels which you use to cater music to your audience and your content. But also, for example, Google Analytics. So that's the second basket. And the third basket, the last basket, are insights. And insights are reports that provide information about your audience and their behavior. For example, Spotify Artist Dashboard. So those are the 3 buckets, really, when you talk about artist data. Josh, where I will hand over quickly, will really go more into detail and will also let you know how you can take advantage as an artist and about those various platforms where you can get your data from. Before I hand over, let me finish up real quickly, and also just from my experience working on the brand side during the last years, it's not just the artists and the artist camps who are working with artist data, it's various parties involved. So I also looked at artist data when I wanted to collaborate with an artist, which means it's just an important topic which everyone really should take advantage of. And with that being said, Josh, I would like to hand over to you.
Great, thanks so much. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick so we can jump into this. Give me 1 second. Okay, everybody seeing that? Looks good? Okay, so thank you so much, Chris, for that really kind introduction before, and excited to share this. I get the privilege to talk about this quite a bit, and I think it's definitely been a core part of my journey through my career. So I think, you know, the first thing is when we talk about data, for most people, this just sits as like a sea of confusion. And it can be pretty hard to explain, especially when we're speaking to the artistic community or management community or whatever it might be in the music space. But the reality is, this can also be very difficult to explain for people that don't come from that space, right? The idea of like how the dead can make what they do work together harmoniously, and the spark that comes from like one part of this ecosystem that allows all of them to kind of implement those things at speed. Like they've spent lots of time in this, and so have we. So we're experienced in this, right? You know, and we have a lot of perspective on how to apply these things when we make adjustments. And that kind of goes to a critical point, even as a debate to kind of what Chris said, this idea of like analytic versus insight. So, you know, if you have an analytic mind, you're really good at using logic to figure things out, right? You don't let emotions sway you and where you're going. Think doctors or scientists or engineers, right? It derives from this idea of like analysis. So meaning it's this detailed dissection of an object or an idea. So, you know, we're thinking things through carefully and thoroughly. But as opposed to insight, like when we have an insight, we have a feeling or an emotion or a thought that actually helps us to know something essential about a person or a thing. So, you know, conversely, insights aren't based on hard facts or evidence. It actually doesn't have anything to do with our senses. It's a sixth sense, right? When we gain insight, we're using intuition. And the word's actual definition is about seeing inward. And I really like this quote from Neil Lewis, who's a professor at Cornell on anthropology. But, you know, he basically talks about the fact that like data actually doesn't say anything. Like humans say things. And the reality is like the only reason we have the data is because humans chose to collect it, and we use human-made tools to do so, right? And so this point that like the data itself does not do anything more than a hammer can build a house or almond meal can build a macaroon, right? What it requires is a human to select it, to shape it, and turn it into an insight. And when we talk about that idea of insights, like our insights have to come from somewhere, right? And as artists that we're artists ourselves, or people that are part of artist teams or their process, we all have strong informed beliefs as a part of the scene or as a part of the setting, you know, that we come from. And these are grounded in, you know, the knowledge and the belief and the arts and the morals and the customs of our community or our society, at least from our own perspective. And the reality is like, this is actually the definition of culture. And so if we're looking at an ethnographical definition of culture, then we're actually talking about this idea of insights plus analytics is actually cultural anthropology. So this group of people, you know, if we're looking to analyze data through this lens and then apply it to what we know, like we combine what we know and what we believe with this information that we can find, and we use this to understand the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors of our audience. Like that's science, right? So we might be in the space of art together, but the reality is this is modern strategic music management. And so it's important that we think things through a little bit through that process and what's available to us in a very scientific way to think about how we do this. So the first part is we are now anthropologists. I've blessed you, right? And in science and research, like when we believe something to be true, we form an opinion into a statement. We build this hypothesis. And if this is what we believe, we now have to intend to prove that or disprove that idea, right? So the first thing about looking into data, before you even look at the data, my encouragement is to say, what am I trying to solve for? Like, what is the data going to tell me that I don't already know, right? And that's when I really encourage you to think or look at the artist, you know, the fan funnel for you as an artist. And if you've never seen something like this, it's a really great tool. And you have to think about, you know, one, what are all the assets that I have available? So I look at this stuff on the left and, you know, it's my content, it's my platform, it's my brand, it's touring, it's merch, whatever it might be. And then I also have to think about where in the funnel am I trying to do certain things? Am I trying to bring more people in to discover me? Or is it about taking people who do know me and converting them into fans? Or is it about taking my existing fans and moving them into purchasers? And then what tools am I using to do this? So once I'm very clear about, okay, I really want to take my existing fan base who's already subscribed to my emails and followed me on Spotify and on Facebook, and I really want to convert them into purchasers. Well, I have to think about what tools I'm utilizing to do so. And then that's going to give me a clear idea on what data I need to go and find. Right. And to Chris's point, we'll get back to this in a second. There's all kinds of data points out there that are available, but you should start with some idea of where I want to spend my time. And you aggregate these things through a mix of data sources. One is about just your field work, right? This is how science analyzes data. We observe the participation of people. How are they interacting with space? We interview and we actually ask people. So Chris said he and his band were sitting at the merch table talking to people. That's also data. That feeds back to you. You have surveys or things like that. Then you actually have raw data that you can work with in aggregate. And then finally, there's experimentation. So the reality is, this process has always existed in research and strategy. It dates back to the foundations of science and research. But the difference today is that all this data is available. And my point being, like, you can have any of it if you want it. Like, I'll give it to you, anybody will give it to you, Craig will give it to you, you know, no problem. But the point is that it is not conclusive. By no means is it objective. It's definitely messy. The sources are broad. It's an aggregation. It comes fast. You have to know what you want to do with it. Right. So I'm going to kind of run through a few different data sources just to make sure you kind of have perspective on what really is out there available to you. So this first segment, you know, is definitely probably the stuff you guys utilize with more frequency, right? These are the first party tools and the social media tools that come directly from the sources under which your audience engages. So Spotify for artists, Apple for artists, Amazon for artists. I love that all these major brands just felt like the most creative way for them to articulate this product is to put 4 artists on the back end of it. YouTube tried something a little different. Ooh, Creator Studio. But you know, we have those tools in the streaming space. We have Facebook and Google. You know, and then in some cases you have Bandcamp if you utilize a tool like that, or Next Big Sound, SoundCloud Pro. But in the end, these are the platforms where the audience is actually engaging, and you can get first-party data from each of them. But you're only going to get it from that source. You're not going to get it from any other place. So once you evolve from there, you actually have distributor and DDS tools, and you know, if you're signed on with a major label, the major labels build their own dashboards that pull in a bunch of different data sources, right? So that they can look at things in a snapshot. Or if you have an independent label, or you have a little more substantial streaming crew, you might distribute via the Orchard or AWOL, Believe, or InGrooves, which all of these guys have their own data infrastructures. Almost all of them are major label owned anyway. So they're all utilizing somewhat of the same system as above. And then you kind of have this new slate with like a Muse United Masters Q&A. They have a certain data set, or you could be independently distributing through many platforms, including what Fuga is doing, right? And so each of these is going to give you some sort of data environment that brings together multiple different data sources, because they need those data sources in order to collect revenues for you anyway, right? So they have those, and they feed those back into a dashboard that you can utilize as a counterbalance to getting that first party data. But then you also have some cross-channel tools that I think are really interesting. And assuming most of this audience is independent in some capacity, there's a tool called WARM, which stands for World Airplay Radio Monitor. And if radio is a core part of your strategy, or might be in the future, this is a tool where you can subscribe for a single song for as little as like €7 a month. And you can monitor where your radio is being played worldwide, where your song is being played on radio worldwide. Also, you can subscribe to other songs that are from artists that might be like you, and you can monitor how they're being streamed, so that or being played on radio, so you might be able to mimic that type of behavior and see what's happening there. And then if you're a little bit more established, you have radio tools like BMAT or Mediabase or Radio Monitor or TuneSat, but the price points on those become substantially higher to get to. And then a lot of you guys might be familiar with 2 different products, Sound Charts and Chartmetric, and those work for the independent community as data aggregators. So you're going to get the ability to put together your streaming data, your radio data, your social data, and potentially even some of the things from your distributor if they work with that partner. But the difference with that is you're going to get a big snapshot of how all those things fit together, but very shallow. Right? So if you're looking at Spotify or you're looking at YouTube, you're going to get something very deep on what happens with your user inside that ecosystem. But if you're looking at cross-channel platforms, you're going to get a lot of perspectives that come together, so you can look at them in aggregate, but it's going to be quite shallow. Then you can expand to social media tools. If social media is a core for what you're doing, I definitely would encourage thinking about a tool like this, not only to service your content out in the world, but also to look at the data that's coming back. So this might put together your ability to look at your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, etc., and the content that you put out in the world. And the benefit is then you can see how this content is performing on this channel versus this channel, and make some decisions on, you know, how those things, how you might be able to improve those. And you can see engagement in more snapshots. And then finally, this becomes a little headier for the people who, you know, are really interested in it. But the metadata space is quite important moving forward from here. In particular, if you start to think about the future that we have as a society with voice and AI. And in particular, you can start to see and feel how your data fits into the machines, right? So there are platforms like Museo that does data scrapes on your music or your release, and looks at that against an entire pool of all of music and figures out sort of where you fit into certain things. So the data in this side is actually less about how your audience reacts, and this is much more about how the machines react to feed your music or your art to the audience. So it's important to think about certain tools like this in what you're doing. And I bring all these back to the point that, like, it actually doesn't matter if we don't think about what the question we're asking is and what success looks like. We need to define, you know, this becomes a quite businessy tool, this idea of KPIs or key performance indicators. But the reality is, like, if you're a small business and you are as an independent artist, you need to define like what success looks like for you. If you're a metal artist in a very niche space and you're aiming for results that are more in line with pop stars, like, that's not necessarily real of what success looks like for your industry in the past. So it really makes sense for me to say, okay, like, what number am I setting that I think success looks like based on things that I've seen that have come before? Or if I totally want to blow those out of the water, like, it's okay to reach for something, but let's be realistic about how will we know when we are successful, and what do we have to measure against that? So to kind of shape this into something, like, the first piece is you have insights in your body. You believe this thing to be true. You believe in your music. You believe in what you're doing. Validate that insight with analytics. Right? Look into the data that you have available and see if that can answer the question that you believe. And vice versa, if you're being fed data, don't just take it on its nose. It is subjective, right? You might see, for most artists, they probably see really good results in Mexico on Spotify. That isn't necessarily because you're the most popular artist in Mexico. That also might mean that Spotify is very popular in Mexico versus other players, or Apple might be more popular in certain Asian countries. The subjectivity of this data, you have to validate that to a point to say, oh, but I also know this about myself, or I know this about my art, or I believe this to be true. So there is a balance between, you know, the logic and the gut, right? But the critical part here being, ask questions, know what the question is before you come in, define a bit of what success looks like for you, then apply these insights, then research the data, and then convert that to a plan, right? That idea of, like, putting these things together. And then the final piece of this is experiment. By no means is all of this going to work. In particular, the speed at which we operate today in the marketplace, like, you have to fail fast. It's a really critical piece of the puzzle. So as long as your whole career isn't on the line with this one project that you're doing, like, you have to use what you learn in this process to test the market and test it quickly. The more you test and the more you get out there with these different experiments, the more data you're actually going to get back on whether or not that's working, right? So that's a really critical piece of this entire puzzle and ecosystem. But more than everything, like, don't worry about the data. Like, make great music that you believe in first, and then let the data validate what you're trying to achieve. Like, if you feel like you're building your entire career, or you're making all of your decisions against the data, you're going to start to compromise your art. You're going to start to compromise what you believe in. Like, focus on the product that you make, believe in that thing. And in the end, if that resonates with a very core audience of very ambitious fans, and that makes you feel good and makes you feel a sense of achievement, like, maybe that is enough for what you're trying to do. So I can't stress this point enough. Like, in the end, the data is a really great tool to give you the ability to market your music, but, you know, make sure that the music is the thing that you believe in first. So anyway, here's my information in case anybody needs to get at me, and I look forward to some of your questions a bit later.
Thank you so much, Josh, for these insights on this topic. And I think you portrayed it very well, that it's at the end of the day really about the art, you know, and the data can really help us, you know, to to just make decisions, if something worked or not. And I think it's about this trying and failing, and I fully agree with what you just said. Before I hand over to Craig, I think, Wolfgang, I would like to mention something regarding also asking questions, right?
Exactly. So by the way, there is also the possibility to ask questions on the live stream. There is the stream talk description on YouTube, and there is a link there which you can use to ask questions. And also, as far as I know, there is a QR code now online that you can see, and you can use also to ask questions. And also on the website streamfestival.at, there is also the chat where you can ask questions. So anytime, tell us, and we hand it over to the participants and speakers.
Thanks, Wolfgang. So now I would say we had this creative deep dive from Josh, and now I'm really also eager to hear that from a company perspective from Craig May, who is heading the global marketing service for Fuga. And with that being said, Craig, I would like to ask you to please come in and start your part.
Sure thing, Chris. I apologize in advance for my voice. I've been a bit sick this week, so that's a little bit croakier than I normally is. I'm just going to share my screen as well, and hopefully it will work. All right, good to go. Oops, we've gone one too far ahead. Josh has probably perfectly set up what I'm going to run through right now, because what I'm going to do is explain how everything he was talking about, how we do it in the real world. So I'm going to run through a little bit how we operate as a team, and I'll refer back to some of the stuff that Josh has said as I go through. And at the end, I'm going to give a real world example of how we use or put all this together to help drive success for our artists. So Josh, seriously, your presentation couldn't tie more perfectly in what I'm about to go through here. So it's like we've designed this on purpose. As Chris introduced me, I'm the Global Head of Marketing Services for Fuga. Fuga is the largest independent digital technology company in the world, part of the wider Downtown Music Group. They say there's about 60,000 tracks delivered to Spotify every day. We're responsible for about a third to a half of those deliveries. In those major companies that Josh had on his list before, 5 of those use our supply chain to deliver their content to the DSPs. What that means is that we have one of the largest pools of data in the music industry, because we're delivering a massive volume of tracks. So we get all the data back on that. So what my team does is sit on top of that, and is a team of global marketing experts that tries to add all those things that Josh was talking about, the data analytics and then the insights on top of the fundamental technology stuff that we do. So you can see I put a few little diagrams here. So we have data, then we have information, knowledge, and intelligence, which really well ties back to what Josh was saying about you need to have that human kind of filter on top of the raw data, otherwise it actually doesn't achieve anything. We try to sit in the intersection of this Venn diagram here between the data points and the numbers, between the audience and the narrative of what the artist is trying to tell us their story. So and yeah, tying back to what Josh was saying is you need to know what the questions are. Our mission as a team is to add value and solve problems by connecting artists with audience and creating revenues and growth. But how we do it is by trying to answer 3 questions. Who is the artist? Who is their audience? And how do we monetize the interaction between that? And we use a lot of data to try and answer those 3 questions. And we have data analysts in our team to help bring all that together. But we also have audience insights people to add that level of creativity and actionable insights from their marketing experience on top of it to really try and drive a result. To do this, we split it up into 3 separate areas. So marketing strategy is the team that really works with our clients and their artists on working out what that story is. What is the narrative? What are they trying to get across? Where are they coming from? And what kind of music they are and how they want to engage with a wider audience. We then have our digital accounts team who are interfacing with the DSPs and wider digital platforms to get that message out there and to try and get the most placements that we can, but also feeding back to those clients is the best practices around how to work with Spotify, or what new things are happening on Amazon Music, or the ways that they can optimize their setup across the platforms. And then the third part of what we do is audience engagement. So this is the more traditional record label side of things, so digital marketing, advertising, promotions, press, radio, TV, and YouTube channel management, optimization, sync and brand partnerships. So this is really, again, trying to optimize that data and making sure the most efficient way of getting people through that funnel that Josh showed you earlier. For example, a lot of the things that he was talking about is the things we do in marketing strategy. So artist proposition, identification, project strategy, KPI definition and structure is really important part of what we play. Every artist is kind of different in what they're trying to achieve. For a baby band starting out, you just want to grow your audience and get fans. For an artist that's in the later stages of their career, you might be wanting to re-engage with lapsed fans and say, hey, we've got a new record out. You used to be a fan, check out our new music. And for those in the middle, it's really about maximizing revenues and making sure you're getting the music in as much place as possible. Product mix optimization, advertising strategy, market and user insights. All of this is really based on data that we get. But as I said earlier, we have a team of people that sit on top of the data to help give strategic and actionable insights around all these things. So in the artist proposition and definition is a really important one in establishing who you are. So we look at this in 3 areas. Oral, so what is the genre or style of music? Where do you fit? What does it sound like? Who are similar artists? Visual, because visual is so much an important part of it now with video consumption going up every day. What is the aesthetic, branding and creatives around the artist? And cultural, which is the broader piece of where do they fit in society? What are they interested in outside of music? Who is their community? And this is where Christoph used to do a lot of great work in trying to get music to fit into a more cultural side of things with the work he was doing in the brand versus artist matrix. And yeah, another big thing that we're really focused on is KPI establishment, as Josh was pointing out how important it is earlier, really understanding where the artist is in their career and what they want to achieve out of the campaigns that we're going through and what they should be aiming to achieve from those campaigns. We look at the product mix, and then we really look at revenue maximization, because obviously people want to maximize their revenue, their return on investment. What's the best way and most efficient way to do that? And all of this is really based on an impressive data suite that we have. Then we get to audience engagement, and we really get here into looking at who we're trying to talk to, how they consume music, in what ways. Social media strategy, brand partnerships all comes into this, and all of this is driven by data as well. So the audience identification is one of the most important things. It's really understanding who your audience, both right now and who you want it to be, is. So where are they from? How old are they? And then how do they consume music? Are they listening? Are they streaming? Are they a physical purchaser? Are they more a passive listener or an active listener? And I'll get into that in a second. And then the audience development is how we want to talk to them. Again, that comes back to that funnel and where they are in the funnel. You need to have a different comm strategy and a different way of engaging people depending where they are in your kind of fan funnel placement. And then, yeah, we look at a whole heap of different things in terms of what kind of content, how live fits into it, how video channel fits into it as well. Active versus passive is just something I want to stop on here a little bit. The music industry has become really two-sided in the way that people engage with music. So you have your active fans who are maybe a long-term fan of the band or hear a song on the radio or something. They're the ones that have added you to their library, and you're directly messaging saying, hey, we have music out. You've liked us before. Check it out. But it's so much more these days about passive music consumption. Music's becoming omnipresent in all parts of our life. You go to the gym, you walk through the supermarket, you're watching TV, music's everywhere. So it's how do we get more of our clients' music in those passive places, but also how do we try and make it so they get an emotional connection at those points and move across to becoming an active fan. And there's lots of different data points we look at and ways we can help advise our clients on how to do this in the most efficient way. I then want to get into now just a little bit showing some examples of what Christoph was saying and Josh about how we aggregate all the data together. Because we have the largest pool, we provide a dashboard to our clients that allows them to access and see what's going on in the streaming space. So this is kind of a way we look at it. So you can see there just under 1 billion streams in this time period. So we're doing a lot. Clearly YouTube Content ID hadn't supplied data on one day, which is the dip there. But you can see the volumes coming through. And this is available to all clients across all their repertoire. And then when we start digging down into Spotify, so really can do this across or where your music's getting played, what are the playlists that are making an impact, how fans are engaging with it to allow you to then make those actionable insights on top of it. And we do this across all the DSPs, and you can lay it over the top of each other. So you don't have to log into an Apple for artists as opposed to Spotify, as opposed to DC Backstage or Amazon or whatever. We put it all in one place for our clients so they can access it all together and really get a true market-wide understanding of what's going on. Start breaking down the genres, where people are consuming. You can see phone, there's the primary way, what age group and what kind, how many are listening to full streams or the first 30 seconds. So really giving you a comprehensive market-wide view, and then into geography as well as to where your fans' listens are coming from. United States, Brazil, UK here were the top 3 for this, but this is the kind of data that Josh was talking about that you need to get a handle on to be able to make that kind of guidance of where you want to go. And then we can break it down into individual playlists as well and really see what tracks are working in which place. And yeah, this is just the playlist analytics for that thing. So that playlist is quite male skewed, even higher percentage listening on phone, and it's in 18 to 24. So once you know who your audience is, you can start analyzing the playlists in your genre to really identify which are the ones you should be targeting in when you're making your marketing plans and when you're putting your advertising plans together of what you want to be trying to get people to engage with. Again, here, this is where the consumption's coming through of those playlists from a geographic point of view. So now I just want to skip across to a real world example on how we use all this data to come together to help our artists. So we've been working with an artist called Will Joseph Cook, UK based. He was signed to Universal. He went independent 18 months ago, and his consulting company that he's been working with is a client of ours. So he fits really well and the style of music that's been popular on TikTok over the last 18 months. So we identified that as a key platform for him to be engaging with his audience in and in building a new audience in. So we really focused on how we're going to do that with his track, Be Around Me. So we started off looking at where his audience is, mainly female, mainly 18 to 24, which is perfect for the TikTok ecosystem. And then we start looking at, okay, what do we want to achieve on TikTok? Where do we want to get to? You can see here the growth that we achieved from when we started working on this campaign in September up until December, and the number of TikTok followers. So we had went from very few to over 300,000 in a short space of time. As we continue to go through, averaging 1,500 likes, 0.5 engagement rate, and 300,000 followers. So this is the level of detail we look on all of this kind of stuff. We then start overlaying it with other information. TikTok, the track started engaging and going viral, so then they started placing it in more playlists on the TikTok platform, which then led to even further engagement and some really great metrics here coming through as to how the track's performing. And we're analysing this on a daily basis to try and feed back to TikTok to get them to editorially support this in an even bigger way. We eventually got up to the point where it was featured as a banner on the Discover page, and it was a trending song on the main sounds, which is the ultimate that you want to get to with a track on that. We're over 3.6 million views and 1.1 million videos, UGC or fan-created videos for this track. And then we did some advertising around it, which we had 3.5 million impressions with a really low CPC. So the wider results is then how do we translate that TikTok success across to other platforms? You can see here on his Spotify monthly listeners, he went up to 895,000. He actually crossed the 1 million mark in February this year as the campaign continued. So over 12 million streams of the track on Spotify now. It went from 211,000 Spotify listeners to 1 million. And then the last track we put out then went across 11 New Music Fridays globally, in other playlists like New Alternative, Indie Listing Peach. So it was us really identifying that his audience was going to work on TikTok and then translating that narrative across to the other streaming platforms to say, hey, there's an audience here, you need to be profiling the track. It's going to have people engaging with it on your platform. For a UK artist to have the top countries, the US, shows the great work that the team's done in building out his territory reach. And it's not just on Spotify as well. It's Apple Music. He's 1.4 million streams on that, and Amazon as well with 200,000 streams. So yeah, that's a really quick case study on how we use the data and the real world stuff to try and and build these campaigns and do that insights and the analytic stuff that Josh was highlighting earlier. So that's me, Christoph. Hopefully I got it done within the 15 minutes. Happy to take any questions at the end that people might have on any elements around that.
Thanks so much, Craig. Very interesting to also see this from the Fuga perspective. And also, I think it was great to see that real-world example, which you mentioned, and I think it was also quite interesting to see this TikTok example. So, one quick question from my side, Craig, before we jump to our next speaker. And we know that everything moves so fast, so it's a big question. Where do you think it will heading? Like all those new platforms, will they stay? Will there be, new platforms coming? What do you guess?
There's new platforms coming through all the time. So already you're seeing there's the competitors to TikTok are starting to come through. Triller and Snapchat was there first. Obviously, Instagram's done Reels, YouTube's done Shorts. So people see what's working and then they want to copy it. But there's a whole heap of innovation coming through. I mean, the creator space is really where things are starting to take off at the moment. Things like Splice, where there's not so many massive global artists that there used to be anymore. It's now very much everyone can be an artist, everyone can be creative. The barriers to entry have come down. You can go onto Splice and start making some music and create your own versions and then distribute it through a CD Baby or a TuneCore or a DistroKid and get it out into the world and start making your own audience. And everything's becoming more niche and it's really about community. So those platforms that allow people to express themselves and to be creative and get their creativity into the world, but also build community around that. And a lot of the TikTok and stuff and even YouTube have the community sections now. So a lot of what we're focusing on is how we foster that, how we help our clients with their community management and really making sure that they're authentic, engage with their fan base and continuing to grow their fan base. Because the days of having mass blanket coverage on a new artist coming through are much diminished from what they used to be. I mean, there's certain examples like Olivia Rodrigo that's come through this year and who's just smashed it this week with her chart debuts. Those are much rarer than they used to be. Those true global superstars aren't as much anymore. It's now really regional and as all the stuff that Spotify and stuff puts out, there's so many more artists now doing really big numbers across their platform. And that's exciting. The democratization of culture and art is coming through. There's less reliance on gatekeepers. Everyone has access to it. So as Josh said, if you're making really good art and committed to it and are authentic and can find an audience for it, there's certainly plenty of different ways that you can now create success and then turn that into hopefully revenues and a way to do it in a sustainable business kind of way, not to be too business about it, but to give you the freedom to really focus on your art and creativity without having to give up rights and all the other ways that used to happen in years gone past.
And just to slip in a little additive part to that, I think we're probably 12 to 18 months away from starting to see data sources from the metaverse and from gaming. Because of how scaled that ecosystem is becoming. So the reality is Fuga may be adding 4 more, data sources that are coming in from those spaces as well. So I not to say that there's a huge landscape for the independent artist community right now, but it's definitely expanding fast and more opportunities are presenting themselves. So, as far as like where it's going, if you want to ask that bigger question, there's definitely data to be scraped from that ecosystem to make decisions too.
Yeah, and that definitely ties up to the passive music consumption thing, because that's the video game stuff. So much of it's music, just part of it, and consumed in a passive way. But if there's a way that you can engage with fans in that and transition them into those or the more streaming platform things with that music, Twitch and those different things are all becoming more music focused. So we spend a lot of time going, how do we move people from experiencing our music in a passive way in those gaming platforms to becoming active fans of that artist on a more traditional music platform. So there's definitely a lot of thought and energy put into that, Josh, and try to put that all together and unlock it and try and really get those massive gaming audiences to also become fans of the artists of music that they're experiencing during their gaming.
Thanks for those answers. And I think, it's a very fast-moving environment. But one thing which I think what Josh said, but then also what Greg just said, it's really about the creativity. It's about the art, right? And it's about the community. And I think that's also the perfect bridge to our final speaker for today. And I'm very happy that we have also an artist perspective today on this We Are So data-driven talk. My first question would be, what does artist data mean for you, SOIA, when you try to reach your audience, and how you are doing it within your releases and stuff like that?
Yes, I would say it's something that I avoid in general if I can, but I cannot anymore. And actually, this was a great way to try to incorporate or like try to observe more what works for me and find kind of the bridge between marketing a product and having the freedom and the leftover brain capacities for actually creating. And I thought, yeah, it's very interesting to hear about the technicalities. I'm learning a lot. I watched a bunch of podcasts. I talked to a lot of colleagues of mine about this, and I learned a lot already, and it definitely motivated me to use it to my advantage and to have the data work for me and not me work for the data. And there were a couple of really interesting points in the talks that I can only emphasize, like, yes, I do strongly believe an artist must look for integrity and authenticity in his and her music first, and if you see it as a product, it's just where music sociology and capitalism meets, and you have to make it work for you. And for me, example, I am not very success driven, I'd say. I started music relatively late in life. I never studied. I'm a biotechnologist. I kind of it just happened. I just did this jamming at some concert in this really tiny Icky club in Vienna with some St. Louis artists that turned out to be like my favorite artists. Really cool crew, and a producer just approaching me and then recording one song that I really liked, and it was the first time I was like, wow, okay, I really like my voice. This is interesting. I love the vibe. I want to listen to it 1 billion times. And apparently other people liked it too, and it just happened, and that was 10 years ago. And we were on blogs, and a lot of blogs in the south of the US, which was really interesting. And the only thing that I can say is that it's really important to me to also hold these personal connections that I have gained in the past and through travels and family bonds. And I have a kind of a very solid crew of older males in the States, in the South, like in Houston. It's like, why the heck do I have a lot of listeners in Houston? Like, I've never been there. Okay, I want to go there. And I have more listeners in the US than I have in Austria. And it's also like I do a very niche music, and it's very untypical it's not typical like neo-soul or anything like that. So it's kind of weird here, and it's weird in the States, and that's kind of okay. And if I'd have to give other musicians or artists advice, then I'd just say to make it work for you and find a compromise. I don't have to have 1 billion streams. I could never, and I wouldn't even need that. I just want to be happy with my creative outcome. I want to use my music and my art. I love connecting with artists. Like if I have a creative team, but I love just incorporating other art forms. Like I think that's for me a huge perk in being a musician. I love to work with independent artists. I love to incorporate my beliefs and activism in my music, and that's just seems like a side effect, but actually to me it's extremely important to kind of share my beliefs in that natural way.
That's very interesting. One question, you mentioned that you have a lot of fans in the US. Did you see that through a Spotify artist dashboard, or how did you know get to know about that?
It actually happened with the first single that a lot of back then blogs were still a big thing, and OK Player and smaller blogs like Bama Love Soul, and just really solid connections to also my label boss, which became a good friend of mine from Philadelphia, and that all happened through mouth propaganda. And I can still see it up to this day that my audience in my insights in Spotify for artists in the States are normally more male identifying and in general older than, for example, my audience in Austria or in Europe. And it's actually pretty funny because I post a lot of political stuff. I post queer content. I'm interested in a lot of range of humanism, and I often think like, okay, those Afro-American dudes that are super into neo-soul, boom bap, like all that old school stuff that I really really enjoy, but how does that fit together with like some atheist kind of queer content? But it works, and I wouldn't care if it wouldn't, and it's kind of funny point. I like it.
Thanks. You're also working on various projects at the moment. When releasing those projects, what are the channels you're planning to use, or you use through your, I would say, communication to your audience, and how deep do you also look on artist data when you're releasing something?
Well, if you have a certain aim, like a single release, then I am planning to use more data and try to plan more. I'm a really indie artist, so I'm really small. I do most of the work myself. I also started producing last year, so I'm also working on my solo album. So a lot of course, if you're an indie artist and you do a lot of these things, and you're easily overwhelmed, and I would say that social media and data is not my favorite. I love creating content. I think it's really important to gain active listeners, like to be sustainable in your musical connections, and always on one level. Like I would never feel like I'm that great and oh my God, my fans. No, my fans are my colleagues in the States, are DJs in Soweto that play my music. Like I love music because it connects me with a lot of people all over the world with really weird connections, and also then meeting those people in like went to South Africa to play, and it was like a really interesting experience to experience Joburg as an adult and more in the art scene, and really be inspired by creative scenes that are not in an Eurocentric way or like in the whole business thing. And that's what's really valuable to me, and that's where I also aim to kind of stay and keep those connections. And I'd say, yeah, I use Instagram. I tried TikTok. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's just a bunch of Kim Kardashian boobs in your face. Like never ever would I. I tried. I can't do it. Facebook is getting like very dead. The algorithm is dead. In Instagram, I do a lot of stories. I try to kind of warm up my audience by trying to also provide content that doesn't call for a direct call to action. I'm very sensitive in a personal matter to advertisement. Like I would rather be annoyed if I'd see an artist, especially in my surrounding in a small music scene in like Vienna, promoting like hardcore promoting online. It would annoy me, so I would also never do that. I think it must be natural, and I think it's important to, it's a give and take, and I like to let people take part in my process, especially being self-taught in singing and production. I like to share the process because it's like an honest process, and I don't like too much shininess. I like the kind of grime that comes with that.
Can I ask a question. So you said that you know about the differences in the audiences in America and in Austria, for example. So do you also exchange the songs on the set list, for example, also maybe based on data that you know, or just from your feeling?
I would, if I had like two different singles, I would use more R&B related or more boom bappy kind of vibes for the States, but also more for the south of the States. And I think I'm in a weird place in between a lot of things, and that's okay. Like, my taste is quite eclectic, but I definitely make changes with like content or the use of singles and in different continents, for sure. Yes.
So you also mentioned, or we talked about that you have various projects going on. What comes next, SOIA? What can we expect coming from you in future?
Well, right now I'm working on a documentary. I'm doing my first documentary on Chinese Red Viennese, like people of Chinese descent, first, second, third generation, mostly because of Corona and just because I saw like a huge influx of more anti-Asian like hate, and that gave me the idea to just broaden the representation in my manner. And as in my lyrics, I like to do my political work more in an indirect way and not like in a moralizing way. So I just decided to kind of portray 8 is a very lucky number in China, portraits of people, yes, for some people, humanizing people that look different in them. And I do the music, I do remixes. It's very interesting. I'm a very visual person. I like visual content, and I'm doing the music. So that's kind of one of the projects I'm doing. I also have a new single coming out in 2 weeks with my with my guitar player that also plays in my band, in my live band. He has a new project that's it's a pretty good name. It's called Pale Male. I love the name, and he's very talented. We have a kind of more poppy, summery vibe going on, where the lyrics are still kind of very meta, kind of, which I like. And I have the project with Mulatte, who's based in Copenhagen. Actually, he's a friend of mine. He's a multi-instrumentalist and a producer that's quite popular or successful on Spotify and is in a lot of playlists. And I actually also search for advice with him, because he's a very authentic, humble, beautiful, extremely talented person that does marketing without making me want to vomit. So I feel like I can learn from him. And we met online on SoundCloud 5 years ago, and he came to my studio 2 years ago, and we recorded a couple of songs. So we just released a single there 5 months ago, which is already 300 years in music business. And I'm also doing my first body of art kind of on my own with production in Ableton, and hoping to watch more than 2 Ableton tutorials, because that would speed things up maybe a little bit. But I'm pretty lazy, so I like doing. I don't like thinking about stuff that much.
That sounds amazing, and really looking forward to your next creative outcomes.
It's gonna be really abstract and weird. Like, if my last things were already non-mainstream, this will be like a bit weird. But I like weird, and that's also my advice to maybe other artists that are listening. Yeah, stay weird. Like, it's okay, and it's good that way.
Thanks so much, SOIA,
Thank you
for taking part on this talk. And Wolfgang, do we have any questions coming up?
Not really from the audience, but I would have a question to Craig and Josh.
Then I would say it's the right time.
Yeah, because I think Craig said that everyone can be creative here right now, but it seems that when we have access to all this data, everyone also needs to be kind of a marketer. So how does that all come together and fit together? So you have the resource of creativity, but also you need the resource of time and also money. I see, because I'm sure your dashboards are not free, so someone has to work and pay for it. So, or with it and pay for it. So, how does this work in the real life? Like, who does what, and how does it work?
Yeah. So, our Fuga's not an open platform. So, we work with a very large number of distribution companies, platforms, record labels, and artist management companies. We don't deal directly with working with artists, like signing individual artists, because we have a lot of clients that do that. So we tend to focus on providing technical services and then marketing services to those people that are dealing with a large volume of artists. But it's certainly not that difficult to get access to the market at a reasonable price point and get analytics to go alongside that. So all the kind of DIY platforms like DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, Ditto, Amuse, United Masters, STEM, all of them have some level of dashboard that you can go in and see the analytics around where your music is being engaged with, the demographics and some of the stuff that I showed earlier. All of those have that to some extent, and most of them are at a very reasonable price point. Usually it's around $20 a year to get a track online and maybe a bit more for an album. Like, there's different models, but you can get a service for $20 a year that will get you access to the market and also get you a set of data that helps you see what's going on, where your stuff's getting engaged with, to allow you to make those insights decisions on, okay, where should we be touring or whatever. And then there's a whole heap of different platforms to help you do marketing in a really cost-effective way. Things like ToneDen, Found.de, which allow you in quite a cost-effective manner to get your message out to an audience, either your existing audience or a potential audience, to say, hey, here's new music that we think you might like. But it also really comes back down to what you were saying before. It's having a quality product that's authentic and that people are going to engage with. And I mean, just because there's creative tools and the access to markets there and everyone can get music into the world doesn't mean that everything's going to get engaged with. And it kind of, I used to be a musician as well myself, and you really need to do it so that it's an expression of yourself and something that you 100% believe in and you want to put out into the world. And if it finds an audience, that's amazing. And if you can make it into a career, even better. But sometimes it's just making the art itself. And if it's something that you're super proud of and you're happy with, it actually doesn't matter if other people like it or not. As long as you're happy with it, that's the most important thing. And if it's a true representation of you yourself and a piece of art and creativity you want to put into the world, be happy with that. And if anything else comes after that, then it's a bonus.
Yeah, I think as an extension of that, which I fully agree with, I think it is important to look more long tail at sort of the evolution of what's happened in the artistic landscape. And as Craig referenced earlier, we're at 60,000 new units a day coming into Spotify. And over the last 20 years, sort of on the back end of piracy, the reality is your business partners in music have changed the way in which they analyze if you make sense to them as a business partner. In the past, it was primarily about the art coming in the door, and that they felt like there was a commercial opportunity to be your business partner and help you grow your audience and help, take things into the marketplace. And now there's a lot of supply on that side of the equation, way more supply than what the business infrastructure can actually handle themselves if they wanted to prioritize and give people things. So now this is why we see whole tiers of businesses like Fuga, that exist to provide, distribution infrastructure to help artists get there. But the reality is like, if you're finding a business partner who wants to help you carry this thing forward yourself, they're expecting you to come in not just as an artist, but actually as a small business, right? They want you to have a bit of a plan. They want to see that you have some traction, that you have an audience, that you have some people that are engaged in what you're doing, because in the end, then them making the investment, like realistically, labels work more like venture capitalists today, right? It's like, you've shown me that your product has traction, that you have some people that are engaged in what you're doing. I want to invest in this business in order to help it grow. And so, the challenge is getting that business to a place that it's worthy of presentation beyond simply the art is a challenge. And I'll say sympathetically and empathetically, because I've been on both sides of the equation to what SOIA is talking about. Like in some cases you feel like, wow, after I do all of this, where do I actually have space left to be an artist and to write and to create and to play and do those things? However, a lot of artists that just say, this isn't for me and I'm not going to spend time doing that, then you definitely have to find a business partner who wants to help you do that if you have ambitions that are greater than simply, being part of your local scene or whatever that might be. And I think, a lot of times people go, well, I'm just going to get a manager to help me with that, or I'm just going to bring somebody in. And the reality is most managers work on a 15 to 20% commission. And if you're not making that much money, 15 to 20% of zero is zero. So the reality is figuring out, a business partner that really wants to help you push things. Perhaps that's a worthy investment of your own financial resources, going to, a platform like ToneDen or 1RPM or, whatever it might be that says, oh, you know what, I don't like social media and I don't like social media data. Like, is there a way to bring somebody in that can help you do that gives you, more return on your investment in your own art and the time you want to spend on doing that? Perhaps that's a worthy spend of your money for the purposes to give you the headspace. But I will say, it's very difficult today to not at least have some consciousness to your data and your business and how those things come together. And in particular, if you're looking for partners to join you and help you carry the weight, they're looking for something really great art plus business, right?
It's called the music business for a reason.
Yeah. No question.
So for somebody who doesn't like social media, that's already working 2 other jobs to provide the money for the basics, who's unlucky with, in Austria we have a really good funding system, but also there, if you got it twice like me, then you should move on and have space for younger artists. But then you can simply not afford to even do the production. And for me, I've always worked really independently. I've released in the States and the last album in Germany. And what would your advice be to somebody that's actually really has a real punk anti-capitalist attitude and a really individualistic approach and doesn't really like to bend myself too much, where to invest money, how to find the right business partners? If you could only choose one thing, should I focus on finding a good social media editor or a manager, or focus on the label? There's just this vast amount that comes with this. So it's really overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's also the motivation that lacks, because it's a lot of work. It's so much work that goes into it, and for most people also it's not this glamorous lifestyle. It's not sleeping. It's working in a cafe and. Everybody wants their music to be good. Of course, you should focus on that first, but it's also about, if I put my heart and soul into something, I also want that baby to have a chance, to have a chance to be heard and to find the right audience and to have do something good. So for me, example, what would your advice be?
All right.
Thank you.
I'll go first.
You
Josh,
can send the invoice later. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's right. With limited budgets, if you're not there's a lot of people that are naturally not social media they don't want to be influencers, or they're not great at that side of it. They just want to focus on the music. So if it was in that position, budget's limited, social media is the main way that you get audience awareness and development now. Is that I would probably look at getting someone to help do social media content creation and get that, and then use things like ToneDen and stuff. There's actually a really good there's a girl called Amber Horsborough who runs a music industry.
One of my favorite people.
Yeah, course thing called Deep Cuts, but she gives a lot of content away for free online, and she does a lot of things like, if you had $500, how would you go about using that? And she breaks it down into the percentages,
what's the name again?
Amber Horsborough. It's her music industry course is called School of Deep Cuts. Yeah. It's something that I'd really advise that kind of baby artists and stuff. She gives a lot of information away for free on, and she used to work at Downtown and stuff. I've done things with her before. So it's to the point I've got one of my staff members now, doing her course to get a better understanding of ways to break down budget and stuff in the music industry.
I do
and I highly recommend anyone just have a look at the content she puts on LinkedIn, Instagram and stuff. She's also does things on I'm having a complete mental break. The voice. Discord. She's got a Discord server. Clubhouse. She does things on Clubhouse as well, where she's really good at giving advice on if you had $500 or $1,000 to spend, how would you break that down and what the percentages should be and ways that you can get impact with minimal budgets. She's someone I definitely recommend looking at that because, she gives a lot of that information away for free, where companies like ours, like obviously charge their clients to do an equivalent thing, but she's probably the best I've seen for baby or developing artists who are trying to get a better understanding themselves because she is so good in sharing her knowledge on kind of that kind of basis. But yeah, in your position, if social media doesn't come inherently naturally to you, I would look at trying to find someone that can help you do social media content, and then look at something like Tone Den and the playbooks and stuff they do in order how to push that out into an audience, because it's a way that you can get the same impact without having to have that weight on your shoulders. Like, I've got to do 3 posts a day on 7 different platforms and they need to engage in a different way. Find someone who is like native in doing that and can help get your message and voice out, excuse me, in an authentic way without having too much cost associated with it. So that would be my advice. Josh, I'll hand over to you.
That's great, Greg, and I will then also help to get that contact. Josh, we're a bit limited with time, but is there something you would like to add to what Greg just said?
Yeah, for sure. Just so you know, it's deepcuts.co. That's how you get to the page. I actually subscribe to Amber's thing, and I would consider myself like pretty experienced in this space, and I still learn things all the time from what she does. So I definitely validate that. But I think the other thing, like, I'm fully again, like, in line with you on the DIY sort of punk rock mentality. Like, I come from punk, that's my my background, and in some cases, like, I appreciate and support countercultural sort of movements, and the fact that you are not alone. There is also an audience of people who don't want to spend time on Facebook and don't want to spend time in those spaces, and that can be a brand strategy for you if you want to do it. You just have to think consciously about the ideas that, like, how do I achieve scale in what I'm trying to do if I, for some reason, want to go manual. Like, if you said, screw Twitter, I just want to make a zine again, and get back to something like that. That can be a really great, like, cultural tactic for you. But perhaps distributing the photocopied printed version around Vienna doesn't necessarily get to reach the people in Houston that we're talking about. So it's what are the ways in which I could still achieve distribution against this thing to help me achieve the same scale and make it still feel like a creative exercise for me. The other thing that I'd say is, if there are people aspirationally that are just ahead of what you're doing, but you really respect and love what they do, a really great research tactic is not to look at your own data, but to look at their data, to try and see what you can get from what they're doing. And if they're a friend, or if they're somebody that you even feel comfortable reaching out to, ask them for access to their data, right? Try and compare yours to what they're doing and say, oh, look, like, I appreciate what they're doing in the social media space, and I'm going to do a 2-week-long analysis on, what they did and why. And perhaps that's a really great strategy for you to go, okay, they only posted 5 times, but the content sort of achieved these couple of things, and I really respect what they're doing, and they're seen as successful. So perhaps I can, mimic that behavior for the purposes of my own creative output, and that can give me at least a starting place where it's not so intimidating.
Thanks so much, Josh.
It's really to do with that community aspect that we mentioned earlier, is that everyone's in a scene and part of a community. So how do you leverage your community to get your message out to fans of similar artists and stuff? So.
Thanks so much, Greg. And I think it's also now time to close this and wrap this quickly off. Thanks a lot for everyone who attended, and also thanks, of course, to SOIA. Thanks to Greg and also Josh. I think artist data is just such a wide spectrum, and I think we really got to the core today also, that it's here to help to make decisions. It's about trying, it's about failing. And what I really liked also now with the conversation we had all together is that it's really about building the community, being creative, and at the end of the day, it's about just believe in the art that you do. And with that being said, it's the final day today of the Stream Festival, and it's just kicked off. So I would invite all of you guys to really stay online and enjoy all those great artists. I'd like to thank the Stream Festival. I'd like to thank the Creative Region Linz and Upper Austria for hosting it. And again, thanks to all our panel talker here today. And I wish you a great Saturday, and take care.